Hey everyone, I'm creating a video on how to use the Ollama API. This is a good way to interact with models that you've downloaded locally through applications that you're creating instead of having to go through the chat interface. I decided to use the Ollama API in this situation because I'm creating a program that is supposed to generate a meal plan based off items that are scraped from the flyers. So we can create a meal plan out of hopefully cheaper items. The problem is the data that I'm getting from the flyers that I'm scraping aren't all edible. So we can see here from Walmart, our Walmart has a grocery store as well. One of the items is an Apple Watch, and alongside it is raw and cooked shrimp. So if I were to use AI to classify some of these items as edible or non-edible, then I can create a smaller list of items that I can feed into a larger model. Dealing with the script data as well, there could be hundreds or thousands of items. So you can't just dump them all because it'll often be too large for the context window. I've tried prefixing a prompt saying like create a meal plan out of these items and just dumping the list of items, and I've had some weird results. It will work in some very large models such as ChatGPT, but in smaller models it just detects like the list of items. I'm guessing because it's exceeded the context window, but all it does is try to reformat the items and redisplay them. So you'll want to make sure you have Ollama running. And let's just look at the first few items for an example here. So we have Coca-Cola, that's edible. Apples, peanuts, ground chicken, and body wash. Okay, so after 5, we should get a non-food item. I just created a duplicate of another script that I have for classification just to show the first few items and show you the type of response we get from just a post. Alright, let's see what we got for responses here. So, don't mind the stack trace here, it's just because I aborted it after 5 items. But you can see the Ollama response comes with a bunch of additional information. As you can see here in response, we will get food, which is what we're looking for. So you could say, oh, I'll just get the property response from the data. But if we scroll down to where there's a non-food item, so food is within the size of a token, whereas non-food now is larger than that. So it splits up the response into multiple chunks. So having a look at the code here, we're just grabbing the response and the data from the response. But what you really want to do to make things a little bit easier is set a response type to stream. Then you add the chunks together to form the response that you're looking for. So let's try that again now. Running my other script that grabs all the chunks and adds them together and responds with a full response here. So you can see we're getting like food and non-food as a single response instead of the multiple chunks that we were seeing earlier. You can see this is still going on. It's because I probably have close to 1,000 items within this JSON. So this could be a much larger too at some point if I start including more stores. So you can see this list can get very long and you won't be able to fit it in the context window, even some of the bigger models like ChatGPT. Alright, so my script ran for about a minute or so. and it dumped all of the results into a file. So we can see here, at your independent grocer, we have Coca-Cola on sale, and that is classified as food because it is edible. So the first few, minced chicken, yes. And then we have body wash here, which is non-food, which is great. So we can ingest this classified products JSON into another application and further filter those items that were scraped from the flyer. I'll just briefly go over the code here, just in case you want to make any adjustments. So we have the input file path, and that is the file with all the items that are not yet classified. It's just name, price, brand. Brand really isn't important, but I scraped it anyway for whatever reason. And the output file path, you can see classified products.json. That's where the output was after the food has been classified, so it includes that additional property that is classification. And if you've followed my previous tutorials, you should have Ollama running. I have this running in a Docker container, so it's easier. You don't have to install any dependencies really if you already have Docker installed. So we use the API generate endpoint, and we specify the model name we're using. That's pretty much it for configurations. You can play with the prompt as well. Here's where we define what kind of response that we want from the Ollama URL, the generate URL that we saw earlier. See, we changed the response type to stream. That's where we start getting these chunks. Then we go through the response data. So for each part of the response data, we're grabbing the chunk, converting it to a string, convert it to a JSON object, grab the parse chunk, JSON object here, and we want to grab the response property and add it to the full response. So this is what is going to be telling us if it's food or non-food. And we're using we're trimming it first, just in case there's any extra characters or extra white space. And we are adding it to the classification. See, classify item with Ollama was the function that we're calling, and that is the classification. We're adding it to the product as a new property, and then we'll save it to a file. Yeah, right here. And that's pretty good. So we have a list that can classify items as edible or non-edible, but the goal of this is to use them as part of a recipe generator for a meal plan. So it's not really good enough to determine if the food is edible or not. We want to make sure that it can be part of a recipe. So Coca-Cola here, it is food, but you don't often see it in recipes. I've had it as part of a roast marinade before. It was pretty good, but you don't often see it in recipes, and we want to basically just get the key items out of these flyers that we want to use for recipes. So we'll go back into the classify script that I've created, and we'll update the prompt. So we have item name here that's being injected into the prompt, and I'll just paste in the updated prompt that I've created. So before it was just checking if it was food or non-food, and now it's going to classify it as an ingredient or non-ingredient. So our prompt is now, is the following item commonly used as an ingredient in recipes? Consider items like raw fruits, vegetables, meats, grains, dairy, herbs, spices, and similar basic ingredients. Items that are prepared meals, snacks, or heavily processed foods should not be considered. If the item is a common recipe ingredient, respond with recipe ingredient. Otherwise, respond with not recipe ingredient. do not include any other text in your response. So that's important because we're just using it for classification. Often large language models will give you a detailed response, but we're only looking for the classification, so you really need that part. So if we go ahead and save this file, run it, it will overwrite the file, and we can just have a peek at the first couple of responses here. So Coca-Cola should be a non-recipe ingredient. Often the first one will take a few seconds. Right, alright, so we have Coca-Cola here classified as a not recipe ingredient. Let that run for a minute and we can see what kind of results we got. Okay, so it's been running for about a minute or so, and we have a new classified products JSON. You can see Coca-Cola here is not a recipe ingredient. There's some other things in here too, so like Rockstar energy drinks. There's like some cakes or something. Yeah, so all these things are edible, but they're not recipe ingredients. I had about 800 or so items that were classified as edible, and let's see how many we have now that are recipe ingredients. I just dumped the formatted results into a text file here. So it looks like we've gone down from about 800 or so to close to 350, which is pretty good. So we have a much more focused list of ingredients that we can try to generate a meal plan out of. I may try to play around a little bit with the prompt, because it did miss some things. So ground or minced turkey here as a non-recipe ingredient, although it would be a really good recipe ingredient. And that's about it for now, for this application at least. I do have another script that formats all this information as well, and then I just basically dump the whole thing into a larger language model chat to generate a meal plan for me. In the future, I'll probably be looking into automating a lot of this. So the flyers come out every Thursday, so I can scrape that on a schedule. And then I'll probably look into decoupling the classification of the items, because that could take an unknown amount of time, and we don't want a response failing on us because it's timed out. And after that, I'll probably email the formatted items to myself, so then I can just copy and paste that text into a larger language model chat, and then generate a meal plan from that. As always, I will add some links in the description on how to install Ollama, so then you can use the Ollama API. And I will attach a link to the GitHub repo where I will store this code as well, so you can just copy and paste it and play around with it. And thanks for watching.